topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready for Insights to Incite? Ready or not, it's showtime. Now get ready to listen in and watch right here on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Join us and together we will escape the mundane. Insights to Incite, here is your host, Brandon Lawson.
He trains my hands for war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. Psalm 18:34. For you have armed me with strength for the battle. You have subdued under me those who rose up against me. Psalm 18:39. Then Psalm 144 verse 1 reads, Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Today is Thursday, July 7th, 2022. This is Brandon Lawson, your host of Insights to Insight, and we want to thank you for tuning in. And we want to say, if you are watching us, not just listening, but if you're a viewer, we'd love to have you chime in on the chat box. I always enjoy your input. Any suggestions you have, whether comments to this show or questions you have, or suggestions about maybe doing a show on something else or something you'd like to hear about. We'd love to hear your input. It always makes me feel good, and even better when I know that I have my audience and you're tuning in and contributing. And today we have my friend Paul Tucker. Last week, as you may know, we had Dean Piper. He joined us for the show, and today is Paul Tucker. Me and Paul have known one another for quite a while now. I mean, what's it go back to, Paul? I think it's been a quarter of a century.
Yeah, that's it's kind of it's hurtful. It's hurtful when you put it that way, but yes, it is a quarter century.
Yeah. I thought that might put it in perspective, make it sound even longer.
Yes, it's even longer. Like. Yes, right.
But Paul, just if you could take a few minutes and introduce yourself, and then tell us about yourself and anything else you'd like to share.
So like I said, I've been a friend of Brandon's for about 25 years. We met at a church and have been essentially almost lifelong friends at this point. I am, by training, I'm an engineer. I work in the paper industry, and a lot of what I do is, from an engineering standpoint, is work around energy production and energy use, so use of fuels and the generation of electricity. And I have a family. I have one daughter who is 20, just about to be 26, so it's about the same length of time that I've known Brandon.
Okay, and last week we talked about positioning, and when we were speaking about that, we talked about the benefits of positioning, how that can help us, what it can do to, what it provides. Today, I want us to talk about, how to position oneself. And I say I want us to talk, or I want to talk with you, because, again, I would love to have you chime in. I want to emphasize that I'm saying talk with you rather than talk to you, because it's always good to have you see your, chiming in, as mentioned earlier. But we want to look at this and, as we consider this, how to position oneself, there are, a few different sports that come to mind that I think of, that when you think of a person's movement or motion, a lot of that is impacted by one's stance or how they position oneself. I can see that they talk about in football. If you're a quarterback and your feet are facing this way, but you're throwing this way, it can throw you off. It can make your throws not as accurate or as sharp. And that, or you look at it in how you're swinging a golf club. If you bend your knees too much or you sway your back when you do it, that alters the swing, and it will jerk the ball or send it, not jerk it, send it the other way, but it can mess you up. And there's other sports as well. And one that Paul is much more familiar with than I am. I know he's played, he enjoys it and playing and watching, and that is tennis. When you hold serve and you go to serve, how does your positioning of your body and your stance, how does that affect the results that you get?
Yeah, quite a lot. I have, although I have enjoyed tennis quite a lot, I have had not a tremendous amount of training, but I remember that I took a tennis course in college, and I remember that is what our instructor really drilled in as how horrible our footwork was, because it really determined so much about the game. There's a part of the game which is to be able to reach up and hit the ball over your head, and it really requires thinking about placing your feet in a position where you're able to reach up and hit the ball and not end up on your rear end while swinging at the ball. And there is so much about swinging, whether it's swinging a forehand or swinging a backhand, that it is about where you put your feet so that when you are ready to swing and hit the ball, that you're kind of lined up to where you're able to hit the ball back over the net instead of into the net or over the fence.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I know a few times I've played tennis, which I think was just when it was part of school. It was part of the gym or athletics. I can imagine when you say hit it, not just into the net, but over or out of the court. It's because I've, somehow hit a pop-up.
Right.
And I go to hit it, But yeah,
and
that's all you there.
Well, and there's a lot about. I mean, part of when you're playing the game, and you're trying to compete and win. A lot of what you're doing is trying to understand your opponent's position and hit it where they are not.
Right.
Or a lot of times, one of my favorite strategies was to basically hit it to where it will land basically at their feet.
Okay.
Because it is extremely hard to hit the ball back when it is landing right at your feet. And that's part of your position on your side, is you've got to keep moving in order to be able to have a place to hit the ball, but you're not scraping your racket on the tennis court surface.
Exactly. I could see that. Yeah. So, yeah, much of sports, how you position your body can affect, the outcome of what you're trying to do. And, along those lines, we're going to look into greater context of how positioning ourselves for life and, how that can, help us to be better, better individuals, better people in general, whether it be for our family, ourselves, or just, it's not going to be zeroed in on any one set part of life, but just an overall have a better life in general. So we want to look at that, but at this moment, we're going to step away to our first commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Are you on the edge of your seat and wanting more? Stay tuned as we go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insights to Insight with Brandon Lawson, right here on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Are you seeking a speaker or coach who speaks life into your people? If so, look no further. Brandon Lawson is one who will inspire and motivate his audience, as well as empathize and relate to all. Reach out to Brandon and let him be your speaker and life coach by sending an email to brandon@connectandimpact.net or by calling him at 513-708-1517. Brandon looks forward to speaking with you, to you, and for you. Let's connect and impact today. Insights to Insight, a real show with real-life messages. This show, which can be found on radio, TV, and our podcast, gives us insight to incite us to action and to excellence. Watch and or listen to Insights to Insight live at 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Check out our past episodes on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us each week, and together we will escape the mundane. We are back with more Insights to Insight, so get ready and tune in to listen and watch. Now, once again, let's join Brandon Lawson.
So, you know, what I've listed here is positioning oneself for greatness and success, for godliness and service. And the lessons that I write and the messages that I give, ultimately, they're more often than not really targeted to those of the church, those who know the Lord and that. But I also try to put it in such a way that even if you don't know the Lord, that you still can grasp things from it. It will speak to you. But with that being said, just since we're not focusing on just a career or sport or just being a Christian or whatever, I think that saying for greatness, for success, for godliness, for service sort of encompasses the whole. And we want to look at this. So, when we think of positioning oneself for greatness, for success, for godliness, for service, just what does this look like? I mean, if you have any thoughts, feel free to chime in. You always the chat box there. But Paul, as you think of these, especially in these two pairs, if you will, of one's greatness and success, and the others being godliness and service, what overlap or what commonalities do you see that fall into both?
I mean, one thing is service and giving yourself, and I think discipline. Those things, which, particularly around, any form of greatness, I think requires a discipline and a service, and maybe the service is around. It could be to yourself, but certainly greatness. Yeah, I guess I'm struggling to make my point. And I guess part of what I was thinking about is, in this overall topic of positioning, is and maybe making the analogy again back to a sport like tennis, is how much preparation is required to be very successful at something like that, or anything, and that preparation sometimes can seem endless, and many times involves lots of mistakes, but it is positioning you for success by doing that.
Okay. Okay. So, one thing I didn't mention success because I didn't mention service because that was in the pair of godliness and service. But what I thought of, the first thing I thought of actually was discipline. That was one of the things I had written down is, as I think of each pair, I see discipline as a critical piece. And then in addition, this next one, many might notice it in like a godliness or a service pairing, but maybe not in the other, in greatness and success. Although I see it in both. And I am speaking of humility. When you think of it, the people that you remember for it, just they really stand out in your memory, or they really made such a deep impression on you. I think of those who, like you talk about sports and athletes who've risen to stardom, the ones that really speak so much to me, and I just admire their character and ability, remain humble. You see that when you think they're on top of the world, and still they're constantly deferring credit to others, and you don't see this arrogance that so many others would, where you get their heads real big or whatever, but yeah, I mean, as I think of that, discipline was the first one, and the second one is humility. I mean, it really seems to stand out, especially when you are such a prominent success, and you've reached the pinnacle, if you will. And but speaking of that discipline, Paul, if you could read for us from First Corinthians, and that are listening or watching, if you want to follow along, we're going to be reading from chapter 9 of First Corinthians, verses 24 through 27. And Paul, if you want to give just a second in case anybody wants to turn there. They can find it.
Yeah.
Before you begin, including myself. I'm there, but in case others need to pick up their Bible and get it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest, when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified.
Yes. And then the latter part there, the verses 26, 27 really speak, I fight not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body. It's a real workout and training. And to position ourselves, for success, for greatness, even to be godly, or, and to do service as, he has called us to do, we need to discipline ourselves. We need to put ourselves sometimes through some, rigid training of sorts, but, and really be prepared and such. And then we find in 1 Timothy in chapter 4, we read from verses 4 through 8, it says, "For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. If you point these things out to the brothers and sisters, you will be a good minister of Christ Jesus, nourished on the truths of the faith and of the good teaching that you have followed. Have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come." And you see that, there can be training for sports or athletics, but, training for godliness it permeates every area of your life, and not just in the current life, but the life that awaits, And so that is much more significant. Paul speaks to his understudy Timothy there. And did you notice verse 8? Let's key in on that one. Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. Yes. So, Paul, is there anything you'd like to add in regards to that or in those remarks?
Well, you were giving examples of those who are not very humble in their success, and I guess part of what it made me think about is how what they have enjoyed when they do that. They've enjoyed short-term success, but basically, and I think when you're that way, you're not in it for the long haul, and I think. I know I feel like in my career, for instance, that humility is really important. It's always positioning for the long term. And I think this, that plays right into, or it's connected to godliness, and recognizing that it's all about recognizing that there's really a longer term, there is a bigger picture, and that should define how we live, how we position ourselves. And physical training, I think, is a good analogy, as he's talking about, and it fits well, with the other passage we looked at. But it is only of short term value. For instance, I don't play tennis very much anymore. I'd kind of like to, but I find that a lot of the people that I play with are just not physically able to do it anymore,
right?
Because of that quarter century has passed.
But in light of that, those verses were speaking specifically about the discipline, but as you tied to humility, the thing about humility that I find, that as I think of this, the funny thing about humility is that if you refuse it, well, then what I notice is its counterpart will find you. Yeah, what I mean by its counterpart is humiliation. Humility is something that you choose to be. It's not something imposed upon you. It's something you decide within that you're going to be humble, and it rises from within. Where humiliation is imposed upon you, going to try to humiliate you, to shame you of such. But you'll find that if you don't learn to be humble, then often in time, it's only a matter of time, you'll suffer humiliation. And I don't have a slide for this, but it reminds me of the Proverbs 16:18, where it says, pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. But in light of that, Roy T. Bennett, I think, said something that speaks well to this. It is better to find your courage to make changes when you can choose to, rather than being forced to. If you do not make change, change will make you. And that's where that, humiliation will come in. And if you don't decide to be humble, the other may catch up, and you probably would wish you were humble, or you decided to be humble and prior to that point. But that's what I
Yep.
see. And yeah, what was that?
No, I was just agreeing. Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah. And so, we can see from looking at this that discipline and humility are needed to position ourselves, for greatness, for success, for godliness, for service. But we're speaking of four, not just FOR, but FOUR. So there's two others we need here. We have discipline and humility. And this next one, I think, is something that is needed. And Paul, I'd like you to share more about, what you see in this word. But the word that I put down is resilience.
Yeah, and if we take it back to the tennis analogy, there's a lot of games that you have to, they're not over quick. There's part of a long, like in tennis, there's sets, and to win a set, you have to win 6 games.
Right.
It's not just a single game, and I think about resilience and as being when you're down 5-0 and you continue to play. And I can think of not many times, but I can think of some times where I have come back and won a set, even when it started off 5-0. And I can think of things on the job where things looked pretty dark, and it didn't seem like that there was really any way to be successful in any part, but resilience is then continues to plod on and continue to fight for what you should fight for, even when the odds are against you.
Yeah, and that's what I see is, resilience is uh, the ability to keep pushing and pressing forward in spite of the opposition, in spite of the struggles, the opponents, the obstacles. And I love what Booker T. Washington said. Booker said, success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome. And of course, that position there is more of a noun, position, a title or whatever you want to call it. But, what you have overcome, and resilience is key to overcoming, especially with, you have an onslaught of opposition, not just for one season of life, then it's all lifted, but one after another. And while it might seem contrary, as I think of this word, it might seem contrary to this other word I came up with, because, when you think of resilience, it's pressing on, you're active in that. But a word that I see hidden within this is the word rest. And the reason being, if you're going to have the resilience to keep at it, you got to get rest. I mean, you think of Jesus himself. He often would go away by himself into rest, and that term rest is tied to the term restoration. When you think of restoring a car, it's to bring it back to its original form, but it helps you to be more whole. And you're in effect replenishing yourself. I mean, you remember parts in the scripture where, Jesus went away by himself and prayed many times overnight.
Right.
But so I see rest being found, in that concept of resilience. It's not saying that you would push on without any downtime, such. But yeah, go ahead.
Right, and rest. I think that part of it. I think the point you're making is that it's a decision. So it's effectively sort of part of your positioning, because if you don't take rest, you can't be successful. So I can't think of any way to tie it back to the tennis analogy very well, other than it's hard to be successful physically if you don't get some rest. And I think in work too. I know I definitely feel I can. If against a critical deadline, I can do a lot of work and work real late and not need any rest during that period. But I can't do that continually, and I've got to have rest, and I know that my team members have got to have rest, because it particularly if you're doing a lot of things where really critical thinking is required. Not having rest doesn't lead to lots of good critical thinking. Typically, it's definitely needed, and right, it just doesn't come naturally. You have to take the time to do it, making the kind of decisions that Jesus made.
Yeah, I mean, whether it be like you said in critical thinking, where you have to requires in-depth thinking, and you need to have your mind, you're fully present. You're not half asleep or whatever, just worn out. And your body, in sports, or just if you're in a physically demanding job, or you have to stand on your feet all day, your muscles need to restore themselves or repair or whatever. You need to get into the rest to do that. And then fourth, I put was sacrifice. I mean, as a servant, really service is about sacrifice. I mean, if you think about it, and whether godliness and service, even greatness and success, you need to be able to, sacrifice yourself, or it could be sort of like the trade-offs, in order to, get, in order to ascend to a higher level, you got to put off this stuff. Just like if someone wants to get healthier, you can't keep smoking constantly, or, eating all the junk food if you want to be more healthy. You got to give that up. It's like the law of sacrifices. You have to give up to go up, and that. But I see that in both, in greatness and success, and godliness and services, willing to sacrifice, and and like sacrificial spirit, being that kind of person. You're willing to set your own agenda aside many times to help others, or or to just whether it's whatever it might be they need, and then yourself even putting aside things you shouldn't do and focusing on what you should. But so
yeah, and I think that's I feel like that. I think about my career and people I've worked around in my career. Particularly people who sacrifice, in effect, sort of sacrifice themselves. I don't mean like commit Harry Carey. I mean that they put others ahead of themselves, and so, for instance, somebody might step up and take the blame instead of allowing it to go to some team when it could have. And I think that's personal sacrifice. I mean, it's related to humility somewhat, but it is a little bit different in that. In a very, very, very small way, like Jesus taking on the sins of all. And I think that it, it's certainly a thing that builds loyalty among your peers when you'll take the blame and not always point blame at other people.
Right.
And it typically can diffuse problems very quickly when you do that.
Yeah, and I like the point you made about how it earns you the loyalty of your people, because they recognize that you took the blame for them, and so now many of those folks would be more apt to be all the more loyal, because I could have been in deep waters and Paul stood up for me, or he stood in the gap, or whatever it would have been, but it makes that person more loyal, most definitely. Good point. And I think that some of you listening, maybe, I mean, I don't know your position in life or what you have going on, but some of you might be thinking to yourself, positioning myself for what? You might be in a very bad situation. You don't have much, or maybe your health is bad, or whatever it is, but you feel like you don't have much of anything to give, and you say, for what, or what do I have, and maybe this is you. And well, I just want to tell you, you can give away your smile, and that can go a long way toward brightening people's days. Sometimes that's just what that person needed. And I'm sure you can relate. You might have seen, a loved one that just brightens your day all the time. Or I personally, whether it be a loved one or, it could be I'm maybe have my head hung and I'm out and about in public and I don't even know who this is, but a little child will come over and look up at me and wave and smile. And it's just what I needed. I don't even know that kid, but just that impact. And so, you might not have much in the bank or whatever, but you can give your smile. And, and as you think of that, of, not being able to give much, I want you to remember the words of John Wooden. I love what Wooden said here. Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Yes. And for those who think I don't have much to offer, remember this next slide. The man behind the nonviolent communication teachings is Marshall B. Rosenberg. And Rosenberg says, your presence is the most precious gift you can give to another human being. I mean, that, what did it cost? Maybe to walk down the road to their house, or, yeah, the price of gas, I get it, but it's high now. But, that's so minute compared to what it could have been. Just giving your presence. I mean, people in nursing homes, hospitals, shut-ins who can't get out. You'll be surprised how much they love you, how much they appreciate you just for stopping in. You didn't have to bring a gift or bring anything other than you, and it can make a world of difference. So you can give others your presence, your smile. And Paul, is there anything you'd like to add along those lines?
Well, so I was just thinking about that seems particularly true as I think about the past 2 years, past few months. It seems like there's a lot more people out and doing things, and people are not as isolated as they have been. But for the longest time, and I think about my father, who is in an assisted living facility, and he essentially went months without having anybody there to be present with him in his room. I remember one time, and he lives pretty far away from me, but has other friends that would typically try to visit if they could. But of course, they were trying to protect them. But right at the same time, that was a loss of being able to be present with people and to share just what you're talking about.
Yeah. And, I think it's so true. We, sometimes forget how, being that such a little minute thing, we lose sight of how impactful it can be, and it's one of those things that you often don't remember how much of a gift it is until you might be on the end of it. Similar to our health. Or we tend to not think much of having good health, and that until our health goes down, and then it really speaks to us. But yeah, well, we're going to step away to our second commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Wow, that was insightful. Stay tuned as we go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insights to Insight right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Are you seeking a speaker or coach who speaks life into your people? If so, look no further. Brandon Lawson is one who will inspire and motivate his audience, as well as empathize and relate to all. Reach out to Brandon and let him be your speaker and life coach by sending an email to brandon@connectandimpact.net
Or by calling him at 513-708-1517.
Brandon looks forward to speaking with you, to you, and for you. Let's connect and impact today. Insights to Insight, a real show with real-life messages. This show, which can be found on radio, TV, and our podcast, gives us insight to incite us to action and to excellence. Watch and or listen to Insights to Insight live at 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Check out our past episodes on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us each week, and together we will escape the mundane. We are back with more Insights to Insight, so get ready and tune in to listen and watch. Now once again, let's join Brandon Lawson.
So, there's a word that many times we hear it, and, to many people, it's almost like a dirty word. They don't really like the term, and that is the term change. Not, you gave $20 for something that cost $12 and you get $8 back, but change, especially when it involves you. You don't like to hear that you have to change, or even if you don't have to, but somebody wants you to. It's almost like, many people, think that you don't accept me as I am if you want me to change. But, I think all of us can attest to the fact that we want to see major differences in whether it be our own life personally or just in our world, and those differences involve improvements. Well, in that regard, if we want to see improvements, we want to see some good differences, then we want to see change. I mean, if you think about it. And so if we want to see this change, we want, this, to see this come to be reality, then, well, we need to properly position ourselves, as we've mentioned. And this will involve cancellations. I alluded to this very slightly earlier, but cancellations, meaning like eliminating some things, minimizing, got to do away with stuff, the trade-offs, have to give certain things up if you want to move ahead. But, and so we think of that, well, I think it would be good if, for us to remember the following. It has been said, you cannot change the people around you, but you can change the people that you choose to be around. And so, we really should not see, I guess it depends on what, the person's asking you to do to change. But if it's something that is not, it's whatever they're asking to change is something that's not good for your health or the people around you, then, as much as you don't want to, I don't think you should be upset, and that's even being requested. But, in light of this, we cannot change anyone other than ourselves. And many times it's hard for us to even do that on our own. But, it's one thing we can do when it comes to others is we get to choose who we spend time with. And I love how Garrison Wynn put it. Wynn said, position yourself to succeed first by building good relationships with the right people, and then put your effort and expertise behind that. So here we can see it goes back to surrounding yourself with the right people. And that is critical. It's like Jim Rohn was once said, you are most like the people the top 5 people you spend the most time with. And, when we get to choose who we spend time with. I mean, if you're a little child, you don't have so much say in that. Your parents go a long way towards dictating it. But as you grow older, you become an adult, you have much more say in, who you're going to spend time with, who you're going to give yourself to, and what have you. And, it is key, that we surround ourselves with the right people. And then next, we should, if we're wanting to see this change for the better, these improvements, beyond surrounding ourselves with the right people, we should challenge ourselves. And you say, challenge ourselves? Yeah. And the reason why is because if it doesn't challenge you, then it won't change you.
Hmm.
Think about that. If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. I mean, there's nothing to stretch you, to challenge you, or to cause you to strain, or even lift a finger or what have you. What change is going to happen? So as we think along these lines, Paul, when you think of over the course of, whether it be your working career or maybe it goes back to when you were, a kid living at home, can you think of a time where, there was something specific that, whether it be of your own life, something you did, or something your parents did, or somebody you knew, that change was instrumental and went a long way, whether it be in, helping them to, whatever their life took on more meaning. Maybe they were so much healthier thereafter, or they were struggling along all this time that suddenly it's like they took a lift off at that point.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about examples that I could think of with my parents. I think for me, just thinking about it in my career development, I mean, I think of in college. So I studied to be an engineer, so I had some basic skills, but and I can't remember all that went into it. But there was about halfway through college, there was a moment, it seems like, where I began to realize that I should have confidence in the things that I was doing, and it made a huge difference in the rest of my my time. And I mean, part of it is I mean, I saw others who worked really hard and were struggling, and I admittedly at the time was not working very hard and struggling. I mean, when I was not working very hard, not making great grades, but right, but it was basically because I wasn't working hard, and I realized that I needed to make the sacrifices to start actually working hard and really try to learn what would be my profession, and that really made a big difference. And I had some encouragement of professors, although not exactly along those same lines, but uh, but encouraging me as I became a much more diligent, disciplined student.
Yeah. And I remember, Paul, it wasn't all that long ago. I remember asking you if you ever got more than a bachelor's degree, and I believe you said you didn't. Just
Right.
got your bachelor's.
Yep.
And yet, I mean, I don't know how long you've held a management position with International Paper, but I know last I heard you had like 3 different titles. And I mean, and I don't know if that's very common for someone with only a bachelor's degree to be able to have such, hold the career or the level of position you carry or what have you. But
Well, yeah. So our CEO has a bachelor's degree. He may also have. I cannot recall whether he has an MBA or not, but
okay.
uh, but 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 certainly a very effective manager. And so yeah. So uh, part of it, I'm not sure that Brandon's alluding to it exactly, but I have been with my employer for 40 years. In fact, just a few days ago, I reached that
Oh,
40-year mark, and for about 30 of those years, I've been a manager, and and kind of like Brandon's talking about, a little bit accumulating titles. So maybe like picking up additional roles where I was trusted to take on something, and to sort of add to the scope of what I needed to do. And as we were talking a little bit about this topic this evening, is thinking about, there was a lot of what I did even in college and early in my career that positioned me for the things that I'm doing now. And some of it was intentional. Some of it was sort of happenstance and very fortunate. But it always involves several of the things that we've talked about this evening around self-discipline. I think around humility, around sacrifice. Those have been essentials in the way I think of it for where I am right now.
Okay. Well, friends, we only have a few minutes left, Nat, and I do want to thank Paul for joining us, and all those of you who are watching or listening. It's always good to have you with us. And I always like to say, that it's pretty much a given. I mean, hopefully nothing in this show, but I never know when I may have or when I haven't. But at some point along the line, I know I'm bound to say something that you're not in agreement with. That it's a given. You're not going to see things the way I see it all the time, and vice versa. So I realize that you and I will never see or never come across a point where we meet someone and we always see everything eye to eye. There's going to be differences, our perception, our beliefs, or whatever. And while you and I won't always see everything eye to eye, nonetheless, I invite you to join me each week, every Thursday here at 9 p.m. for another episode of Eye to Eye, Insights to Insight. And as we get ready to go off the air, I want Paul to share this with us. This, tell us the title of that article there.
So do we have that article up? Here we go.
There we go. The top 6 ways you can position yourself for success.
And I think this is written by May Nui. And what she says, one is say yes, but no is okay too. Be confident in what you know. Be confident in who you are and what you know. Then others will be able to see it too. Third is an implicit expectation that you can. Fourth, keep a long-term focus. 5, make time to do what you love. And the hard one, number 6, embrace change.
So there you have it. The 6 top ways to position yourself for success. And once again, we thank you, and we look forward to having you next week here next Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see you then for another episode of Insights to Insight.
Wow, what an insightful show. Thanks for listening in and watching today. If you missed any part of today's show or any other episode, check it out on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Now take today's insight and utilize it. Incite yourself to action and to excellence in the week ahead, and join us again next Thursday and every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for another insightful session with Brandon Lawson as he speaks to us and shares some more insights to insight.